Hello and welcome back to the Architectury Multiplatform Modding in Minecraft series. And after we've added a block entity in the last episode for our Ruby crate, we are now going to make this Ruby crate into a block that can actually store items. We'll do it similar to a chest, so we'll have the standard chest inventory essentially when you right-click on a Ruby crate block. And it will store the items, and we can take items from it and put items inside of it. It works essentially like a chest, just with a different block attached to it. And the first thing we need to do for this is modify our block entity so that it can store the items. And for this, we're going to change the superclass from block entity to base container block entity, because the base container block entity is the basis for all block entity types that can store items. And to be able to store those items inside of our block entity, we need to define two properties. The first one is the inventory size as a public static final int, and we set it to 27 so that we have the classic 3x9 slots of a chest inventory. And we also need to define a non-null list for item stack that actually stores our items then when the block entity is created in the world. We need to initialize this items list using non-null list.withSize inventory size and then itemStack.empty. And with that, we have a block entity that now can store items, but we don't have any methods implemented yet that actually do this. And as you can see, IntelliJ already tells us that we are missing a few methods to implement. So let's open this dialog and select all the methods that are actually required to implement so that this will work. And the first one is the component getDefaultName, and this is the name that is displayed in the game. And here we return component.translatable and put in a translation key here, in our case container.tutorialmud.ruby_crate, and we can already now add this key to our language file, so into our language file and specify this key here as a Ruby crate, so that the name is then later shown when we open the inventory. The next method is the getItems method, and here we simply return this.items. And the setItems method, in a similar way, we set this.items to the parameter we get here. Last but not least, we also have the createMenu method, and this is the method that is called when the block should open the inventory that we see as a player. So there are effectively two components to a container. One is the data part that the game knows about, and that is what we implement here inside of our block entity. And the other is the visual part, the screen and the menu that the player actually sees and where everything is located in there. And for now, we are simply going to use the default chest menu for this to work with our block entity. And for this, we return here chest menu dot 3 rows, because we have a 3 row, as I said, with the 27 is 3 rows with 9 slots each. So we use the 3 rows method, put in our container ID, our inventory, that is the player inventory, so the inventory of the player that right-clicks on our block, and this representing our container inventory, so essentially this items method up here. And with that, the only thing left to do is the getContainerSize down here, and we need to set this to our inventory size we've implemented up here. And with that, we are finished inside of our block entity. We've done everything we need to do here. And what's now missing is that we need to actually open the inventory when we right-click on the block. So we need to head to our Ruby crate block. And the thing is, Minecraft in itself does not give us really a good option to check whether a player right-clicks a block. But that's where Architectury helps us again, because Architectury provides us with a right-click block interaction event. And we can implement this interaction event inside of our block class, and then we need to add the corresponding method click inside of our class here. And this method is now called every time a player right-clicks on our block. We still need to register this event with Architectury, so we go up here and call interaction event.rightClickBlock.register this. And with that, Architectury now knows that if a right-click block event should occur, this method down here will be called. But, and that is important, this happens with every block right-click, not only if we right-click on our Ruby crate. And so for this we need to implement a little bit filtering here. So we check here if the block entity of this position is null, because then it can't be a Ruby crate block, or if it's not of the type Ruby crate entity, so the block entity class we created here. If one of those conditions is met, it is not a correct block for us, and then we will pass the interaction, meaning that we don't do anything, and say the game, okay, you can continue with other checks. Similar, we also pass interaction if the player presses shift, because we don't want to open the inventory when the player shift clicks it, for example, so that we can place blocks on our Ruby crate without opening the inventory. And if the player is not holding the shift key down, then we call the open menu for our block entity, which we get from the instance of up here. And then we say the interaction was a success, so that the game knows, okay, something happened here correctly, and I don't need to check any more things later down the line, for example, placing blocks or so. And that we can open the block entity, but there's still one thing missing, and that is if we break the block now, the items inside of the container would simply vanish because we don't have anything yet so that they are dropped. And for this, we are also going to implement the onRemove method from the block. And in here, before we call the super method, we can use the containers.dropContents method, the dropContents on destroy method. And in here, we can then pass a state, a new state, a level, and a position. And with that, all of the items inside of our Ruby crate entity container here should be dropped when the block it is linked to is destroyed. And that should be everything we need to do for a Ruby crate block. So let's launch the game and see if it worked. And with that, welcome to the game. I have a Ruby crate here, and let's place it down, and let's also get some wood and open the inventory. And as you can see, we have a Ruby crate inventory, we have our standard chest slots up here, we have our player inventory down here, and we can place oak logs. So for example, in this pattern, and if we leave the inventory, walk a bit around and open it again, you can see the blocks are stored. We can take them out, we can put more in, and if we break the block, you see all of the wood drops onto the floor, we get our stack back. And another thing that should work is if we take a hopper and place it, for example, below our Ruby crate and place now our wood in, you can also see that the log is pulled out by the hopper and lands down here. And in a similar way, we should also be able to put, for example, hoppers inside of a Ruby crate block. So with that, you now know how to make an inventory, a simple storage inventory out of your block. And in the next episode, we'll go a little bit more into detail about the other block we added when we talked about rotational blocks, and that is our Ruby furnace. See you then. Goodbye.